There we are we're watching this robot. How are you? Good morning. We're watching this robot, a humanoid type robot. Well, dancing the cha-cha-cha. Well, dancing obviously to traditional music. Obviously, these robots are more and more amazing with impressive agility. Also in other images of the day. What we're seeing here is the moment when the farmers over there in France are singing the national anthem. Prior to the protests against the planned trade agreement in the European Union with the South American trade bloc Mercosur, this is happening while the police are arriving and surrounding those who have been blocking these roads during the protests as well. These floods are occurring. This has been happening since yesterday in West Side, in Reno, and in other areas of California, United States. These floods are part of the weather that has been hitting that area of the United States hard. In a moment, we will have the analysis of everything that's coming in the next few days. Even on December 24 and 25 and January 1 and 2, how is the weather going to be on those days? Well, especially the most complicated part, right? Which is the cold, the snow, the rain, and also for the South of America, the heat. Look, here's another image that we're seeing here. It's a weapon from South Korea that's designed to, well, enter a bunker. Look, it goes into a bunker and notice how the explosion comes out the other side of the bunker. Well, this is part of the deterrent weapons that South Korea shows to its neighbor North Korea. Look at the precision of the shot and also the ability to go underground and destroy a bunker. Honestly, these kinds of weapons are becoming more and more impressive. On the other hand, listen to the following. This is over in Aleppo, Syria, where there are shootings happening. Let's stay alert to see what we can hear over there. Can you hear me? Can you... There, in the background, you can hear the explosions, the gunshots. We will stay alert to see if there are any reports to find out what this is about. And well, there is still instability in Syria, and we have to stay alert to what is happening in that region of the world. Meanwhile, this car is being reported, which apparently had an explosive device placed on it. A high-ranking general of the Russian army lost his life after a bomb detonated under his car in Moscow. The person was identified as Lieutenant General Fenil Sarabarov, chief of one of the departments of the General Staff of the Armed Air Force. Pardon from Russia? It is being investigated, and the possibility of Ukraine's involvement in the attack is not ruled out, while Ukraine is increasingly operating inside Russian territory. Also, another image that surprises us today is this one. Let's listen. There in the background, you can see some of the smoke from the fires that have been happening. Here is another image from that moment. Yes, that's happening. Well, this is what you can see. It's a large-scale fire that broke out after Ukrainian military intelligence drones attacked the Temanyangev-Tejas maritime oil terminal in Russia's Krasnodar region. According to the Kyiv Post itself, the attack damaged equipment at the oil terminal on the liquefied petroleum gas dock in the key port infrastructure. And well, another image that is also surprising is this image of a tornado. This is in Santa Rosa, in Alto Paraná, according to reports. That's also over there in Paraguay. And there's also another matter that draws attention. Well, part of what's been happening in the world, let's say. This image that draws attention today. This is part of what's happening over there. In the background, you can't see explosions in this area. Explosions are being reported in this area. This is part of the Thailand-Cambodia conflict. We'll talk about how the situation is going in a moment. And well, today this was seen in the skies. Over in Israel, these trails were seen, and there was fear that this could be some kind of missiles. The condensation trails from airplanes were seen in the sky over several cities. This time from Iran. Actually, from Iran, they caused fear, thinking that they might be attacking or firing from Iran toward Israel. So these images started coming out, and people asked me, what could they be? Are they missiles or something else? Well, absolutely nothing happened. They were just normal flights. But let's say there's a bit of paranoia in that sense, right? Well, that's how things are. By the way, also check out how the situation with gold is going, which has been surprising. Let's take a look at this. Look, gold has already broken the all-time high. This was the all-time high that happened around October 20th or 22nd, which is this date, and now there's another all-time high, even higher than the previous one. $4,436, $4,470, that was the highest point, and gold peaked around 4,450. It's impressive. Gold, silver, platinum, and several metals have been rising in price in an impressive way. Gold reaching an all-time high. And what does this mean? That there's nervousness maybe about what's coming in 2026. Are they seeing something? Or are they simply getting ready and central banks are buying gold? What's happening is simply a lot of institutional activity. I mean, governments buying gold, big institutions buying gold. Maybe it's because of the distrust that the dollar has been weak, and the dollar, well, it continues. Look, this is in relation to the Mexican peso. I mean, the value of the dollar falling against the Mexican peso in this case. But it's more or less the same in other areas, let's say. I mean, it has been, well, let's say weak, not weak. The dollar is still weak, and that's also important. Nothing happened with oil. I mean, really, look, this is the movement there is. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Nothing really important happened with oil. As it was said that maybe something would happen because of the movements going on between the United States and Venezuela with these oil blockades. Well, there was no reaction in the markets. Absolutely nothing. They're the same. Even with a downward trend, there isn't any significant movement in that sense. In a moment, by the way, we're going to talk about what's happening in Wyoming with this case of a year of drone WAF activity in which the authorities warn that this keeps happening, it keeps going on, strange objects are still being seen in the area, it hasn't stopped, and right now we'll also talk about all the details of what's happening in China. China is moving nuclear missiles right now, and this is obviously making everyone nervous because we're seeing it. What is this event seen in China about? Has it been analyzed? And well, it's concerning in terms of geopolitics, and obviously it's also worrying when it comes to weapons. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first let's move on to other important matters. Look, this man, this general. A moment ago, we saw the destroyed car from a car bomb that was set for Lieutenant General Fanil Sarvaro. He is the chief of military operations of Russia. He's not just anyone. The authorities have opened a criminal investigation for the elimination and use of illegal explosives after the explosion that cost the life of this high-ranking military officer, which happened in the south of Moscow. Reports say the chief of the Military Operations Directorate of the Russian Armed Forces General Staff is believed to have died today, Monday. Now then, this event has obviously made the Russian military elite nervous. Why? Because this is not the first case to begin with, since it has already happened several times. And it's the same modus operandi, a well-known modus operandi, right? Where the vehicle or something close to the path of a general or an important military officer simply explodes and they lose their life. According to what is known, after the explosion of a device hidden in the car, the incident happened 150 meters from his residence on Yesenemo Street. According to confirmation from the Russian Investigative Committee, the bomb placed under the car was a magnetic mine that detonated after Zavarov had already driven a few meters. The authorities opened a criminal case for the elimination of this person and also for the illegal trafficking of explosives. The forensic and criminal investigation team is examining the attack site and analyzing security footage. Investigators aren't ruling out any theories, but possible Ukrainian intelligence involvement is already being discussed. Zavarov, 56, reportedly took part in military campaigns in Chechnya and Syria. In 2022, he was added to the Ukrainian blacklist. Miro Toberets, which identifies alleged enemies of Ukraine. His death is a major symbolic and strategic setback for the Kremlin, which has lost several high-ranking officials since the war began. President Vladimir Putin was immediately informed of the attack. In the past, he had already harshly criticized his own intelligence services, saying, well, how is it possible that this is happening? They should prevent this situation. And well, that's part, let's say, of what's happening. By the way, speaking of events, also important ones regarding security and all that. Do you remember this individual, one of those who allegedly fired shots over there at Bondi Beach, not in Australia? Now we know what's happening with this person, but they transferred who would be the mastermind behind the attack. The case of the Bondi Beach attack continues to shake Australia and has generated several reactions internationally. The New South Wales State Police confirmed the transfer of Naved Akram, 34 years old. This individual was transferred from a hospital to prison after recovering from injuries sustained during this situation, which happened on December 14th. Today, the 21st, he's leaving the hospital. He left 16 people dead and dozens injured in an act of hatred against the Jewish community. This happened near the beaches, one of the most popular beaches in Australia. The authorities have filed 59 charges against him, including 15 for murder and 1 for terrorism, which carries the maximum penalty of life imprisonment. The investigation also found that Zahid Akram, his father, co-authored the attack and died at the scene. That is confirmed, and the situation is reconfirmed. A moment ago, we saw images of what is happening in Cambodia and Thailand, where they are still operating, still trying to go all out in that conflict. And apparently, there is good news in that regard because they are returning to the negotiating table. According to reports, urgent talks between Thailand and Cambodia are being restarted, and they will resume talks this very week to try to agree on a more lasting and concrete ceasefire than the one made with Trump. The goal is to define real mechanisms to ensure that the ceasefire is upheld, unlike the agreement in October, which was rushed to coincide with Donald Trump's visit and lacked realistic, solid details. That's why, this time, the table will be calmer, without pressure from anyone's agenda except for the two countries involved. Since December 8th, the conflict has escalated alarmingly. They even used Thai F-16s to bomb Cambodian positions, while Cambodia responded with M21 missiles and rockets from mobile launchers. More than 36 people have lost their lives, and there are reports of over 900,000 people evacuated. Obviously then, this is a situation that will begin to de-escalate starting this week. An excellent piece of news to close out the year, that a conflict, well, starts to have dialogue, that people start sitting down and things begin to calm down, right? So, well, that would be important, a positive piece of news, right? Obviously, for things to calm down a bit. By the way, other matters that draw attention are starting to become more and more important. It's striking how Donald Trump has been removing 30 career diplomats from their ambassador positions. It seems like the embassies are becoming gifts for Trump's friends again. And the real experts on the subject, the career diplomats, are losing their jobs. They're putting in agents, well, friends. Basically, Donald Trump would have carried out his biggest diplomatic purge in years, since the first term. And something like this hadn't been seen in this period. Almost 30 career ambassadors were removed by the Trump administration to replace them with figures completely aligned with his agenda. Friends, basically, suddenly altering the diplomatic structure of 29 key countries and possibly a 30th that is about to be announced. The White House ordered nearly 30 career diplomats to withdraw immediately, reducing their number from about 100 to 30 by today or tomorrow. This is one of the largest restructurings of the United States diplomatic corps in decades, according to State Department officials. Under conditions of anonymity, obviously, all the affected ambassadors were originally appointed during the Biden administration, and there had already been a first round of dismissals at the beginning of Trump's second term, when the priority was to remove political figures. However, this week, Washington notified its missions, formally requiring their return to the United States. Although they will keep their ranks, they will be able to take on new roles in Washington. The State Department also defended the move, stating that it is a standard process in any administration, according to them. Well, the fact that they remove people with experience and put in people without experience, obviously this is not something standard. This is something very Trump style. It's something very common in his way of governing. Let's move on to other important matters as well. Well, so what's going on with Maduro and Vladimir Putin? Russia has promised full support to Venezuela in the face of hostilities from the United States. That's how the Russian document itself puts it. And this, well, although at first it seemed that the support was going to be very minimal, at least on paper, it looks like they want to get a bit more involved. Honestly, it's very complicated for them to do it. Because, well, just barely. They're just barely able to more or less contain what's happening over there in the situation in Ukraine. But anyway, this is the message he's sending out today. Russia expresses full support for Venezuela in the face of what they call an escalation by the United States, which is keeping military ships in the Caribbean blocking oil tankers. The announcement came after a call between Foreign Ministers Sergei Lavrov and Ivan Gil, both diplomats. They mention bombings, alleged drug trafficking ships, and the seizure of Venezuelan oil, including one that is currently being pursued. Lavrov said these actions seriously threaten international maritime transport and regional stability. The United Nations Security Council meets tomorrow. It will be interesting to see how countries position themselves. Tomorrow there is a United Nations Security Council meeting and there will surely be reactions. This is going to be interesting. This move by Russia could be backed by China. The United Nations Security Council, how far will the support go? Will it be merely diplomatic or will there be some kind of action? Honestly, I don't think so, but well, that's what they're reporting from Russia. President Donald Trump has basically toughened action starting these days, especially on December 16, which is when the total blockade of sanctioned ships was ordered. These are ships that are internationally sanctioned, and because of this, they are stopped or seized along with whatever they have inside. Russia confirms this, so is it simply a show of solidarity or does it carry deeper meaning? They call it total support, but it doesn't really look like there's going to be anything more right now, does it? Today, something else stands out, and it's related to what we're about to discuss regarding what's happening in the nuclear areas of China and other countries. About the moves they're making. But Iran refers to everything that's happening with the nuclear weapons they're supposedly making, right? According to the reports, Iran reaffirms its right to enrich uranium. Despite the attacks, it warns that there will be no agreements if zero enrichment is insisted upon. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Saragachi stated Iran will keep developing nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. They say it's not for weapons, they insist it's for enrichment. For nuclear plants, that is, for civilian purposes. But when the International Atomic Energy Agency has reviewed it, when the United Nations Agency has looked into it, they say, look, this is not for civilian purposes. It's enriched to a level where it's definitely going to be used for nuclear weapons. It has no other use. And when they ask, hey, but then why is it enriched to this level? They go silent. There's no answer. The kilos and kilos of enriched uranium that have been detected are uranium enriched to make nuclear weapons, and not just one, but several nuclear weapons. So all of this is obviously on the edge of what's acceptable. Enrichment should be at 10% for civilian use. This one is at 60%, and at 90% it's already nuclear weapons, but 60% is already weapons grade, and 90% is definitely nuclear weapons, right? So clearly they're in that process, very far from the 10% that's required for civilian purposes. Well, keep that in mind. And in a moment, we'll talk about what's happening in Wyoming. Let's see what that sheriff has to say. A couple more things, and then we'll move on to that topic, to what's happening in California. By the way, there's also a warning about a strong storm in some areas, and there are already floods in some sections. Another thing that stands out is that right now, the United States Department of Homeland Security has tripled what they call the departure bond. In other words, undocumented migrants are being offered $3,000 if they leave voluntarily before the end of 2025. This obviously is something that causes a lot of distrust, right? People who want to leave don't trust this will actually happen, just as they say if they want to leave now. The measure is part of a Christmas campaign by the Trump administration aimed at cutting detention costs. Deportation, which reaches about the cost per person to be detained of $17,000. Yes, so they say, well, instead of spending that, we give $3,000 to the people. We put them on a flight to their country, a direct flight at no cost. We reduce all the fines they might have, and we incentivize in a cheaper way. Sending migrants to other countries applies only if they register and leave before December 31, 2025. You can access the incentive through an app called Customs and Border Protection Home, developed under the framework of voluntary deportation. Travel assistance is also offered, including the return flight to that country. The Secretary of the Department of Security, Kristi Noem, warned that they want that. Well, if they leave that way, they can come back later, but if they leave under arrest, they'll never come back. I mean, they won't be allowed to return in the future. That's what the person in charge of security in that country is at least warning. There are a lot of uncertainties. For example, clear information on how long immigration and customs enforcement protection lasts, such as for those starting self-deportation, hasn't been published yet. There are no official figures on how much has been received or how many got the bonuses or trips. I mean, there are still a lot of doubts about how this is really operating, or if this is just a scam or not. I mean, there are real doubts about whether this works or not, right? But well, it's part, let's say, of what is being proposed by that Department of the United States. And we'll see what happens, right? In the meantime, let's move on to other matters. Let's talk about what's happening in Wyoming and what's happening with China and other topics. Thank you very much to the whole community, by the way, who are here live. Let's get those comments ready. Leonardo, how have you been? Miguel, greetings to California. How are you? Marta Plasencia, it's great to see you. Jose Zarate, my namesake, how have you been? He says, good morning. Here in San Francisco, it started raining, says San Francisco. Hey, says Jose. We'll talk in a bit. What's coming up next? Ready? Greetings. Thank you, Odilia. Very good, Octavio. How have you been? Very good, he says. That's why China is preparing, says Octavio. Maybe, or maybe not. Let's get into the details. Let's see what's happening with China and what's going on with these drone cases with UAPs over there in Wyoming. Let's go with that. Look, first, let's go with the China case. There's definitely something strange going on with China, to the point that, well, now the media in the United States and other countries are starting to worry about what's happening, about what's going on with these ballistic missiles that have been moved, that are being transported by China. First of all, the report says that the famous ICBMs, these intercontinental missiles, which are those giant missiles, that's why in the video you saw those huge missiles in miniature, right? Let's see if we can put them up here on the screen. The giant missiles, right? They've been moving around. According to the Pentagon draft leaked to Reuters, it's a leak about something the Pentagon realized. China would have already loaded 100 intercontinental ballistic missiles by now. Normally, they are inactive, meaning they have them, but they are not active. They don't have them ready to fire, and this is, let's say, a kind of calm, right? When they prepare them and leave them ready and loaded to fire. You say, wait a minute, what's going on, right? And that's what's happening right now. Does China have them, or is it loading them? 100 ballistic missiles. And the Dongfeng, 31 intercontinental ballistic missiles have been loaded into strategic silos near Mongolia. The missiles are currently ready for immediate use. These are solid fuel missiles, which means they have a much faster response capability than liquid fuel missiles. The report warns that Beijing would not be willing to engage in talks on nuclear arms control despite diplomatic efforts by the United States. At this moment, President Trump has accused China of conducting secret nuclear tests and warns that the United States could resume its own atomic tests. Beijing has denied the accusations, stating that it complies with its international obligations on nuclear non-proliferation. The Dongfeng 31 can carry a nuclear warhead of up to 300 kilotons. With an approximate range of between 7,000 kilometers and 11,000 kilometers from where it can strike. Somewhere else in the world, right? According to the Atomic Science Bulletin, China has been rapidly accelerating its nuclear modernization program in recent years. And now, by keeping these 100 missiles active and armed, ready to fire, China would have 600 nuclear warheads, of which 276 have intercontinental range. Although the figure is currently difficult to verify, it is not known whether it has increased or decreased. No, but the Pentagon's projection is that China will surpass 1,000 warheads before 2030, becoming the fastest growing arsenal in the world. It's a very opaque system. The Chinese report is very secretive, not very precise, right? And only with intelligence, with satellites. And all of this, well, they've been able to more or less observe what's happening. Like, for example, the loading in Mongolia. In Mongolia, they're loading the intercontinental missiles, and this obviously keeps them in check, right? Since we're on this topic, just a quick comment. There's a reaction, by the way, from China about what's happening in Venezuela, and we mentioned it once before since we're talking about China. China has raised diplomatic tensions by publicly accusing the states. It seems strange to me that they hadn't reacted, especially since one of the 3 ships is Chinese. There are 2 Iranian ships and 1 Chinese ship. Has China responded yet? The fact that it took them a while to respond also means that maybe they don't care that much, but obviously they had to respond. The spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Lin Yan, condemned the action as an arbitrary seizure without international legal backing, not even approval from the United Nations Citizens Council. During the press conference held today, Monday, December 22, Lin was emphatic. He said, "We do not systematically support unilateral, illegal sanctions or any kind of unilateral intimidation." China also reaffirms its support for Venezuela, saying Caracas has the right to form partnerships with any country without outside interference, he said. These statements come right after the United States announced a total blockade on Venezuela. We've already been talking about that. We've seen this total blockade where there are already 3 ships, right? I mean, it's not a joke anymore, right? It's not a coincidence anymore. This is really happening. If there's a complete blockade of the oil passing through there, shouldn't we take a look at it? What happened with the Chevron ship? I guess nothing will happen to that ship, right? Obviously, I suppose. But we'll have to see about that later. But yesterday, the vice president of Venezuela said a Chevron ship would leave. Let's see. Probably nothing will happen, right? Hi, Angie. How have you been? DAM sends greetings to the whole community. Lately, I've been having some problems with the network. Hey, where are you connected? Dan? Where is that happening? Greetings, Leonardo, says Pepe. It's a shame that quantum supercomputers and artificial anti-alliances are 90% occupied with war in these areas. Greetings! How have you been, Leonardo? Very good. That's why China is getting ready just in case, says Octavio. Well, let's move on to other details. Let's go to other topics. Let's talk about what's happening, obviously, over there in Wyoming in the United States. What are the sheriff and authorities of that country saying? Because, yes, there's the issue of drones, of UAVs, or whatever we want to call them. Very active in the area. Greetings. Greetings to Jose Zarate. Very good to everyone in the community who's joining. Please leave your comment. Thank you to everyone who supports us through super chats, channel memberships, or super thanks. Your help keeps the channel going. Thank you very much for that. Danny, how are you, Sadi? A big hello to everyone in the community who's joining in. In a little while, we'll gladly read the comments, right? And so, well, we're analyzing a little bit, just a bit of what's going on, right? There's a detail there. In a little while, there will be an announcement from the Pentagon. We might be broadcasting via cell phone wherever we are, but it seems like it. President Donald Trump, along with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and the Secretary of the Navy, John Pillen. They're about to announce a major United States Navy reconstruction. The announcement seems unrelated to Venezuela, Ukraine, or other areas, doesn't it? Let's see if that happens. It could also be Iran, right? There are movements happening in Iran. Let's say interesting ones. We have to remember that just yesterday, the United States and Israel had a conversation about Iran, about what they are seeing in Iran, and it seems like something is coming there. So maybe you could also comment on that topic. We'll get to that in a moment. To the topic of WAPs. There's a swarm of WAPs, drones, unidentified flying objects at the power plant in Wyoming. And this problem, it's actually been happening for over 13 months. With this situation, the authorities had to come out and admit what everyone around the area was seeing. This situation is still a problem. Yes. It's specifically a county in Wyoming that has had this problem, which they haven't been able to control, right? And we have to look at the map, right? Because, well, to understand where this situation is happening, isn't it this little piece, that part over there in the United States, that would show an anomalous activity? Totally anomalous. Let's focus on Wyoming. This area of southern Wyoming contains a huge county within its territory. But it has a power plant that has been witnessing a rather peculiar situation. The authorities had to come out and admit that for 13 months they have been observing drones or unidentified flying objects that keep appearing over the energy facilities. Some of them have strange formations, simply impossible for a drone, formations of unidentified flying objects. UFOs, that's what they're also called, now officially referred to as UAPs, have been reported flying in swarms. That is, in groups, this over the Great Desert and Jim Bridger coal plants also. This in Rock Springs, Wyoming. Let's go specifically to this spot, to this place, to Rock Springs, to try to find exactly where this place is. Look, there it is, this little spot. Let's see if we can see it, this little spot. There it is. It's over this place where it's happening. Now, to get really specific, let's zoom out a little bit just to see if anyone who's listening to us lives around there, please get in touch, especially if you've seen anything. If you live in Utah, Colorado, Idaho, or the areas near this part of Wyoming, get in touch. And I would love to talk with you to see if you can give us any opinion about it, right? This little part of Rock Spring is where the situation is happening. Unidentified flying object swarms regularly appear over power plants in coordinated high-altitude formations. They haven't responded to the attempts at contact that the authorities have been making to tell them, well, to leave the area, but they just won't go, right? John Grosnick, the sheriff of Sweetwater County, was one of the first direct witnesses. He and his team have documented multiple sightings, and even this month, sightings have been reported in that area. The sheriff's spokesperson, Jason Maurer, confirmed that even Congresswoman Harriet Hanegerman reportedly saw it during her official visit to the plant. The Congresswoman was there and happened to see one of these wafts or one of these objects. I mean, they're flying around freely without any problem, and they appear and even show themselves, right? Federal support has been requested, but according to Maurer, no one wants to respond, even though the case has been raised to state and even federal levels. There's no response. The local population has already gotten used to the sightings. At first, they flooded the police station with calls saying there are some objects above the plant, but now, since they appear again and again, people don't talk about it anymore. They just record or ignore it and don't report it since nothing will be done. Second, this happens daily and hasn't caused anyone harm or problems, right? It's not like something bad is happening or anything. They're just there, they show up and they're there and they persist. He says, though they haven't caused damage or interference, their persistence is puzzling and concerns authorities, especially due to their closeness to critical infrastructure. It's not an isolated case. 7 others. Is it Jericho? This is unbelievable. It doesn't appear in the media because they don't want it to, but it's truly unbelievable. Look, 7 sheriffs from the same counties are in the same situation and have the same reports. It's not just one sheriff seeking attention. 7 sheriffs say this is a problem, and it remains. It's not an isolated case. There are 6 other sheriffs plus this one, making 7 in total. They have been reporting the situation. Multiple sightings in the counties over the last 13 months, including, for example, in Niobrara, where the objects were seen throughout last winter and this current winter. They continue to watch them closely, but nothing is happening. At the state level, there is a senator named Tim Salazar. He's a relative of mine. He publicly questioned the head of the Wyoming National Guard about the phenomena. And what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely. They spoke to the Wyoming National Guard head. He spoke to a senator, and the senator said, let's see what's going on here. These sheriffs are telling me that this, and this are happening at the power plants, at the electric plants. And that's how it goes. That's the proof. They absolutely got nowhere. General Greg Porter stated that incidents near federal facilities cannot be discussed publicly, which only increases speculation even more. So when they publicly ask, well, what's going on with this? It's just that topics about plants, in this case, coal power plants, not nuclear ones, you can't talk about the subject because it's forbidden, and that's the end of it. Do whatever you want. Although power plants are usually hotspots for unidentified flying object activity in many places, normally it's the nuclear ones, but in this case, they're not even nuclear and still have high activity. The case is still open and unsolved, with increasing public pressure on the United States government and state of Wyoming to disclose what they know. It's one of the most persistent documented cases in the United States, and it's not the only case in the country. It's not the only case in a United States state. Others exist, but this one is especially persistent. The phenomenon is there and keeps happening. It just won't go away, and it's been many months now. And as Musa would say, I wouldn't say and nobody does anything, but yeah, nobody does anything, so what? And I say it again, do as you please. I mean, in any case, we would have to see if there will be any kind of demand from Congress in these public hearings to investigate, to analyze, to look into it. Because it's not a small object. From time to time, there are swarms and they go and go and go and go and go, and then that's it. That's it. This is very, very blatant in the sense that even senators ask them publicly and they dodge the questions 100%. This topic is incredible. Let's discuss other important topics. let's move on to other interesting matters as well about what's happening in the world. Look, before that, because there are other topics I want to talk to you about these WAP cases, I'll tell you about them in a moment. Other irregular situations that have been happening in the airspace of other countries and the United States, which I also think are related. Today we'll talk to you about that. Just let me quickly comment on what's happening. Well, this storm that's happening in the United States, by the way, there's also a storm in South America. Today we'll talk to you about that situation, but let's go over what's happening and what's coming in the next few days in the United States, Mexico, Central America, and Canada. What's also happening in Europe with the issue of extreme weather? Let's quickly get to the most intense details, especially when it comes to the weather. For the next few days, let's update this. Let's go exactly to the 24th, which would be this one. This would be the forecast for the 24th. By the way, good morning to Sadi. Great. How have you been, Sadi? To everyone in the community joining, good afternoon. And to Ivan Diaz, how are you? Great to see you all. And we'll talk about what's happening right now, up in the skies, right? It keeps amazing us and keeps showing that it's a very intense, very constant phenomenon. In this area, there have been a series of very cold temperatures. And not only that, but if we look at the satellite from the last 15 minutes, we can see how there's a large amount of water over California. All of Northern California is under heavy clouds with a lot of water. Also toward other states, for example, what we're seeing toward North Dakota. It's this huge phenomenon that's currently over that area and also over some areas of Winnipeg up in Canada, right? So, in that area, there's also a lot of humidity, a lot of potential for rain. By the way, if we look at the accumulation of new snow for the next few days, and from here, we go from now until January 2nd, yes, look at the amount of snow expected for the United States in the western and central areas, but especially for the northern part of California. No, well, that's a lot of centimeters of snow now, for example, in San Francisco. No, well, there's no snow accumulation at all. I mean, it might rain a little, but not much yet. I'm not sure. We'll see. But there's no snow anywhere around here. There's no snow anywhere in the mountains or Northern California. In Eureka, for example, there may be significant snowfalls, with some intense areas reaching up to 100 centimeters of snow. Where it is going to snow more intensely and more widely is in Oregon, right? There in Oregon, whether it's a little or a lot, you're going to get snow in the coming days. I insist this is from now until January 2nd, 2026. Not the same for Washington, no. Not for the state of Washington, no. Not for the city, no. There is also a chance of snow, although for Seattle, for example, which I think is the most important city, right? There's only 3 centimeters of snow over there, which is very little. None expected in the next 2 weeks. Now, some places have no snow or just 9 centimeters. Very little, right? But there are other places where it could be snowing much more heavily. Obviously, there are a lot of mountains here, so it's also a bit tricky to observe these places. I mean, because in the end, many areas are mountains and obviously they have more snow, right? But if we go straight to the cities, Victoria, Seattle, Vancouver, you see it's not much. For example, Vancouver is expecting 19 centimeters of snow in the next week and a half. No, so well, make sure to get that too. There are other areas where I see more of a problem, for example, for Colorado, even Utah, where the snow, or Oregon, where the snow is more widespread. No, apparently at least in the northern part in Utah, in the western part of Colorado, well, you can see a large amount of snow moisture in this case. And also towards the northeast of the United States, especially for New York. Yes, Connecticut, well, they're going to have New Hampshire, Maine, all this area, well, they're going to have significant snowfall. Not extreme, but significant snowfall. No, at least for now, there doesn't appear to be a vortex or any stronger front. Nothing more than what we already experienced a few days ago with extremely strong winds. But if we look at the coming days, nothing is expected until the 28th. The temperature will drop in the west and center of the United States, and that will also bring low temperatures. For Mexico, right? And there we can see it, how it spins and moves eastward. It doesn't start here at the fronts and goes over there, but it stays relatively calm. Yes, with some cold, for example in Florida, but not freezing, let's say, just cold temperatures, nothing more. And in Mexico, it's more or less the same. I mean, you see cold temperatures, but not freezing, right? I mean, still not freezing. By the beginning of the year, by the time January comes around, the cold starts to get closer, you see, because it looks like there will be lower temperatures by January 1st or 2nd. Harsh temperatures like minus 30 degrees in Idaho. I'm getting way ahead of myself and this can obviously change, right? But anyway, just keep that in mind. Heading down to South America, there's a major storm happening, the one we're seeing here in Argentina. There it is. It's a large storm bringing a lot of rain and it's gonna hit that central region of Argentina pretty hard. Not much rain for that area of Argentina. We might see some problems there, some flooding and things like that because the storm is big. Also in Paraguay, Uruguay and Argentina, but in the northern part the storm is even more intense. This one is bringing a significant amount of rain and is currently over Paraguay, parts of Argentina, and parts of Brazil and Uruguay. Right? This storm is very extensive. It even reaches Bolivia. Yes, exactly. So be alert because it could also bring heavy rain, water, and storms. It's like a summer level, right? There's hail and other things, but also heat. That's happening in that part of South America too. So by the way, what we're also seeing is a bit different and it's changing in Spain. It's changing for the next few days. In Europe, a very strong front is coming. Although it doesn't hit directly as much, it does hit in Europe, but where it hits the hardest, look, where doesn't it? I mean, it's getting very close to the border with Ukraine, but it hasn't reached there yet, right? And we've shown images in recent days of these vortices that are hitting Kazakhstan, Siberia, other regions where it's hitting really hard, or China, for example, Mongolia, etc. Vortices that are hitting Europe. Someone will come to Europe soon, so don't get too comfortable. They're on their way. Colder temperatures around December 25th or 26th, the cold will be felt a bit more, right? Well, this is also part of what's normal in winter, around the first day, more or less. That's when the temperatures will get more intense. Between the 30th and 31st, they'll get very intense. Temperatures between Ukraine and Russia are already minus 13 degrees Celsius. Being outside in the middle of a war, well, that's not just anything, especially, look, that's for the capital, but where the war is, which is this area. Minus 4 to minus 5 deg C, where the front is strongest. Well, that's how this loneliness is going to be, being there at times. Well, with a potential vortex, it looks like it might arrive on the first day, huh? Up to minus 17 degrees at the war front. What's coming for the first days of January for the war is going to be really tough. They must already be preparing now, and at that time, freezing temperatures will hit Europe, even northern and central Spain. So, well, that's how things are. Let's move on to other important matters. It's been the year of drones, or rather the years of drones, because it's 2 years, 2024 and 2025 have been years of drones, of objects, of proving that, well, these are there, well, these objects, whatever they may be. And now the problem or the situation that's happening there is openly talked about, but nothing is really done. It really seems like there's an impossibility. It's not possible to operate. It's not possible to pursue, to continue. These types of objects have even been shot at. We have to remember what happened or what has been happening in NATO, where even though the topic is hardly talked about anymore, the objects keep appearing. We have to remember that in this whole NATO region, Baltic countries, Central Europe, and so on, operates have been appearing. No, at first they said, well, they must be Russian drones. Look, when Russian drones enter, for example, Romania or Poland, they bring them down, they shoot them down. I mean, they have no problem doing that. But these drones have been different. I mean, they operate in a way where they're very fast and, well, it's not been possible to bring them down in any way, not even to follow them. Let's read some comments. How have you been, Beatrice? Good afternoon, greetings. How are you doing, Beatrice? Greetings to Fernando, Ivan, Josefina. A big hello to Odilia, Adilson, Veronica, Patri. How have you been? That's what the pepper say. Happy start of the week. Hey, yeah, it's already the Christmas week, and a lot of people are out shopping or getting ready for whatever is going to happen on the 24th and 25th, right? Greetings to Robel. How have you been, Robel? Greetings to you and your family, Octavio. He says no. The main issue is China, but greetings, Octavio. How have you been? Melanie says, Melanie Alfonso, how are you? Hello. Cuba sells its oil to China, she says. Cuba sells its oil to China, Melanie says. How have you been? Greetings, Odilia, Leonardo Miguel. Greetings to California. Very good. Thank you so much, by the way, for joining us, for your support, right? Thank you so much for that support. To the members who send us a super chat, we really appreciate it. Greetings to Florida, to Sanford, Florida. How have you been, Jen Weiss? How have you been? What's new? How's it going, Margarito? How have you been as well? Greetings to you too. Look, Tampa, Florida, big greetings. This year, I think we've connected well with people from Florida and California. Well, with California, I think it's been that way from the beginning, but it caught my attention that people from Florida didn't connect to the channel as much. And now it's great that they do. Ivan, how have you been? Greetings, he says. Thank you very much. Also, greetings to Chile. Ivan, how have you been? How are things going over there? He says, greetings. He says, give me a little oil. FB Cine, how have you been? If you're okay, isn't this wild? I mean, it's almost gone unnoticed because right now there are so many news stories about everything. It really catches my attention that we're seeing a historic high in mid-December. Why is that? Because it's strange, because in the middle of December is when a lot of operations leave the market, right? It goes down, it goes up in October, November, December, and then it drops toward January. Because in the end, a lot of people use that money to make purchases and so on. So the money goes toward consumption and other areas, right? It really catches my attention that gold keeps going up. Maybe it even formed the pattern they call the cup, right? It's like it goes down, then curves upward, then drops again, and then shoots up, right? But let's see if in the next few days it drops a little and then shoots up. The point is, with a chart or without a chart, it's just that gold is way up, it's at the top, it's at the highest point in history. Right in the middle of December, when the year is just about to start, 2026 starting off with gold at its highest. I find it curious and strange. We'd have to see when that pattern has repeated itself in history, if it ever has, if it's ever happened before. It's really interesting. We'll analyze it further later. In these strange gold patterns we've seen in 2024 and especially in 2025 where there's been a pattern of excessive pricing, right? It's been quite a big deal. He says, I keep reading comments. Miguel, how are you? Good morning, Miguel. Very good. Who else is here that I haven't greeted yet? Well, I've already greeted you. I've already greeted Fernando Ocampo too. Greetings, Fernando. Very good. And who else is out there? Odilia Bueno, and greetings to everyone watching the replay. See you in a little while. We'll keep talking. I think the next broadcast we'll do outside. We'll be walking around a bit, and that way we can show you how things are right now. Monterey. In some places, well, because it's the Christmas season, right? And we'll keep talking about what's happening in the world. A big greeting, a hug. See you later. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching PP News Live. We see the events of planet Earth and outer space secrets are analyzed like nowhere else. Thank you for subscribing.